Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Choda and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Folks, Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, gave a rather interesting press briefing today where, as I was listening closely to what she was saying, I was actually able to identify some key aspects of the White House strategy towards the stimulus, towards the economic recovery, towards income thresholds, towards their priorities as far as the reopening of schools are concerned. And the reason I bring up schools is A, because it's important, our children are important, and B, because the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, there he is, he wasn't very happy today on the floor of the Senate where he slammed the policy from the White House about needing more money for schools. So we're going to analyze some of these comments. I encourage you to watch the video all the way through to the end because you'll get some big insights about the way they're approaching stimulus right now, including new information about the potential income threshold as far as the stimulus checks are concerned. Let's just jump right in. In the first segment, we'll hear from Jen Psaki where she says that the administration is open to an offer on state and local funding in the region of $160 billion. This is the first public concession we've heard from the White House about their $1.9 trillion stimulus package. Just to get our viewers and subscribers caught up, as far as state and local funding is concerned, the American Rescue Plan with President Biden, there's President Biden, there he is. Hello, President Biden. That includes $360 billion for state and local funding. On the other hand, the plan from the Republicans, the 10 Republican senators, includes exactly zero for state and local funding. As far as I know, and I know a little bit of math, zero is less than $360 billion. See, that's why you come to this channel, to learn about basic math, like zero is less than $360 billion. But let's get to Jen Psaki's comment where she says the White House is open to an offer around $160 billion on state and local funding. Let's watch.
You saw the president say earlier he's still confident he can get some Republican support. Mitt Romney was asked about that a little while ago, and he said, well, if they're not going to budget off the $1.9 trillion number, it's not going to happen. He was then asked, well, can you give us a specific example of something that demonstrates the differences? You didn't mention it. He says the $360 billion or so for states and localities. Is that something that is considered negotiable by the White House?
Well, I'd be interested because I didn't see, so now I guess I'm asking you a question. What Senator Romney said about whether they would propose any funding for state and local.
He said that the most recent reports show that the average state in America only lost about 1/10 to 1% of the revenue, so it should perhaps be adjusted.
Well, they are not proposing any. So I would suggest, given that they also supported 160 or 180 billion in a package that move forward under the Trump administration, that's a place where we would certainly welcome an offer from their end on what state and local funding they'd support.
So folks, while all of this is going on, all these negotiations are going on because they're still talking, both sides are still talking. The Jen Psaki was specifically asked if the president is going to be distracted by the impeachment trial, because the impeachment trial is going to suck up a lot of oxygen in the United States Senate because there's a highly divisive impeachment trial, as you might expect. Jen Psaki said the president is focused on American families while the impeachment trial is ongoing. Super interesting comments. Let's roll the tape and hear from her.
Does the White House and President Biden support their efforts to organize and form a union?
As you've noted, the president is a strong, longtime believer and supporter of the efforts of labor unions and workers. I have not spoken with him or our economic team about this particular report, nor had I seen it before I came out here. If there's anything more to provide you, we're happy to follow up with you directly.
And I did have another question on Secretary Yellen calling for a meeting with top financial regulators on GameStop. And we understand the meeting is likely to happen this week. Will the meeting be held on Thursday? And will the focus really be on whether Robinhood treated retail investors unfairly over large institutional investors?
Well, I would send you to the Treasury Department for any specifics on the timing of the meeting or the focus of the meeting. For any of you who have not seen this report, Secretary Yellen has called a meeting with the SEC, FRB, FRBNY, and CFTC. She believes the integrity of markets is important and has asked for a discussion of recent volatility in financial markets and whether recent activities are consistent with investor protection and fair and efficient markets. That will be the focus of the meeting, but for more details, I would certainly send you to the Treasury team.
And folks, in other comments, she talked about the importance of funding for schools, and she said that it's very important to fund schools. It's important to help our kids get back to school and help kids get back to school safely, schools to reopen safely. And on that, she seemed to agree with what the Republican leader wants, the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell. But it's very clear that the Democrats want funding for the schools. Let's listen to important comments from the White House about their approach towards funding to reopen schools. Let's watch.
I would say that the purpose of giving funding or supporting funding and getting it to school districts is to ensure that teachers are safe, that kids are safe, that there is necessary PPE, that there is ventilation in the school, that there is the environment that allows for children to return safely. And that is the president's focus. That's why he also wants to reopen schools and wants them not to just reopen, but wants them to stay open, which as a mom, that is pivotal. But he knows it's essential that it's done in a safe way.
Anything on the unions not allowing some school districts to reopen?
There's discussions in different districts, as you well know, between school districts or and elected officials and the unions, and we certainly hope and encourage progress on that front. But the president's focus is on the schools reopening safely and them staying open.
Now, folks, this is where things get super interesting. Seung Min Kim from the Washington Post, you've heard me mention her tweets several times. She was in the White House briefing room and she asked Jen Psaki about the $2,000 stimulus checks, which President Biden promised on the campaign trail and during the Georgia Senate runoff races, and the fact that now people are going to get $1,400. I've actually done another video on essentially the misunderstanding between the $2,000 stimulus checks and the $1,400 stimulus checks. And Seung Min Kim asked if this was a broken promise. Listen, whether you see this as a broken promise or a misunderstanding and you're cool with the $1,400 checks, that's your decision. That's for you to decide. But let's hear the response from Jen Psaki, the official response from the White House about this situation. Let's watch.
During the Georgia runoffs, President Biden campaigned specifically on $2,000 stimulus checks. And obviously, as we've discussed, the payment is $1,400. There doesn't seem to be an active discussion on actually raising that amount. So is that a broken promise to voters who may have been expecting $2,000 checks if Democrats won? And would the administration be open to raising that amount?
Well, you're right that the president is very focused on ensuring millions of Americans receive those checks and that pivotal relief at this point in time. There was $600 payments, as you know, in the $900 billion package that passed in December. This is $1,400. Together, that's $2,000. So it would be delivering on the promise he made, and it's something that he is firmly sticking by.
Now, folks, the next segment is also very important because when it comes to the stimulus checks, the White House said that the president is open to targeting the stimulus checks. In other words, making sure the income threshold was lowered. But Jen Psaki specifically said we're not going to change the size of the stimulus check, but we can potentially change the income limits or the income thresholds. Very interesting comments, which will have implications as far as who gets the check, who doesn't get the check. Let's watch.
Earlier today on the call with House Democrats, the president talked about better targeting the stimulus checks. I'm wondering if you could just explain what he meant by that and what might be under consideration.
Sure. Well, as we've said in here a few times, but I know this is an ongoing process. You know, the president, having served in the Senate for 36 years, fully recognizes that the bill he proposed, that he did a primetime address on 2 weeks ago, that may not look exactly like the bill that comes out, and he knows that. That's part of the legislative process. So further targeting means not the size of the check. It means the income level of people who receive the check, and that's something that has been under discussion. There has been a conclusion, but certainly he's open to having that discussion.
And speaking of income thresholds, she was specifically asked to define an income threshold. Is it 40K? Is it 50K? What is it? Now, it's very interesting the way she answered this question because she didn't answer the question, but she did talk about the definition of the middle class, and she said that she basically said it was subjective. But interesting how a White House official is able to answer a question while not answering the question, which is not new. But it's an interesting thing to see, which is why we're going to play this segment. Let's watch.
The president has said he really wants to protect the middle class. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, when it comes to things like direct payments, what's the income range by which you define the middle class? Like, how much does someone who's middle class, how much do they earn? What's the range?
Well, there are ranges in the bill, as you know, that are what the president proposed and what he outlined during his primetime address. I don't know that he looked at the bill as his own personal definition of the middle class as much as a definition of the people who need help the most.
So that's that bill is the rough range and how you're thinking about it?
I think I just said it's not the definition. He wasn't looking to answer the question for economists around the world on how to define the middle class. He was defining who needs help the most now, and that's how the bill is defined and why he's so focused on ensuring those checks get out to the American people.
And folks, speaking of income thresholds, here's a tweet on your screen from Arthur Delaney, who works with the Huffington Post. Arthur reports that the Democrats are indeed considering lowering the income threshold to reduce the number of people who actually get stimulus checks. Last time, you remember, the threshold was $75,000. The Democrats are considering $50,000 as a threshold. I did allude to this yesterday because this was reported by Jeff Stein from the Washington Post. But this is something that Arthur Delaney from the Huffington Post has also reported. And let's also show you the article from the Huffington Post. So we'll put up that article on your screen. Democrats consider withholding stimulus checks from wealthier households. A more targeted approach would result in some households missing out on their checks. So folks, let me know what you think in the comment section below. We'll provide you with the link to the press briefing as well as this article in the description section below. If you learned something new, please give me a like. Please subscribe. Please enable notifications. I would greatly appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Talk to you soon.